Welcome back. It is not every day a former FBI director testifies before a Senate committee and calls the President of the United States a liar. But then again, if you haven't noticed, these are not ordinary times. Yesterday, recently fired FBI Director James Comey testified in painstaking detail on his allegations President Trump directed him to drop the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Comey also acknowledged he gave his memos recounting his encounters with the president to a friend for the purpose of leaking them to the media. Comey testifying he did tell the president that at the time he wasn't the target of the FBI's investigation into whether members of the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. Today, the president shot back, saying Comey's testimony proves there was no collusion and no obstruction, and that Comey is a leaker. Joining us for more on The Week in Washington is Jack Riley, Assistant Professor of Political Science at New College of Florida, Frank Patty, Secretary of the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Jeff Orenstein, the author of Fixing of American Government. Boy, is that a profound name for a book title right now. But Frank, let me start with you,
Sure.
and I know you're a supporter of the president, but I was wondering if you could react to something that the New York Times wrote today. In his anger at Mr. Comey for refusing to publicly disclose that the president was not personally under investigation, legal experts said Mr. Trump may have actually made himself the target of the investigation.
No, I don't think so. New York Times, first of all, came out that what they printed before was wrong. Which
They're standing by their story.
They could stand by it. It's wrong. Basically, by him saying it, Comey picked what he wanted to say and put into that memorandum. He picked out, he never said in his memorandum that the president wasn't the target of the investigation. He put everything else in, but he nicely dropped that out. Mr. Comey, as I said before, should get an Academy Award for his performance out there.
Jeff, do you agree?
No.
Or disagree?
No. Given Mr. Trump's behavior in the office and his proclivity to anger people and to be fast and loose with alternative facts, I would have to side with Comey on this one.
You know, Jack, this is almost predictable. Democrats are going to believe that this was really very telling in terms of the president and his behavior. Republicans are, by and large, defending him. I'm curious what the people in the middle are thinking.
The people in the middle are the interesting people in many ways, because there's the 30% of the population that are always going to vote for the Democrats and 35% that are always going to vote for the Republicans. But these people in the middle are starting to fall away from the president a little bit. Even people that voted for him in the past election are starting to. They don't like this Comey story. They don't like the Russia stories. So we're seeing some melt away from that Trump voter base from 2016.
Does this whole story, if some of these elements are true, one thing, the Russian meddling in our election. Number two, whether or not anybody in the Trump satellites, as the president said, was involved in any way, and the president's personal response to some of these issues. Does any of this bother you?
Well, this has been going on since July, and you don't have an iota of evidence of any of these things happening right now. You don't have any proof of any collusion with the Russians. You don't have any of that. You have James Comey. I could walk out of here now and put notes down about our discussion. They may not be what we said. It's my interpretation, or I decided to add to it. I don't trust Comey. Comey has not at all been a good head of the FBI. He's played some games where he should have gone to the congressional committees, such as with Lynch, when she told them matter instead of an investigation. That was something that should have reported. If he thought the president of the United States was telling him to drop the case against Flynn, or if he thought he was interfering, that's where he should have gone. But he said he was a coward. Come on.
Jeff, Democrats don't like James Comey either after what he did in terms of...
I don't speak for all Democrats, but yes, you're right.
So, you know, similarly, what is your take here?
My take is that where there's smoke, there's probably fire. We don't know what went on in the closed hearings. I do know that there is a special, Mr. Mueller.
Special counsel.
I wanted to say special prosecutor. Reminds me too much of Watergate. I know it is. It is the same thing. I think there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and probably there is nothing impeachable at this point, but impeachment is essentially a political choice. it's not a legal choice.
Jack, you are a political science professor, not an attorney, but isn't it true in any investigation, normally if this was a homicide investigation, the prosecutor is not going to tell you the evidence that he's collected until he either indicts or doesn't indict?
I mean, we are waiting to see what the prosecutor comes back with. That said, it is true that over the course of American history, impeachments have been as political as they've been based on evidence. They've been.
Right, and as you saw in the ABC story before, you had a former Republican member of Congress saying that if this was a D, that impeachment proceedings will already be underway.
His opinion. If it was such as that Hillary had said, I would hope is not a legal term.
All right, we are just getting started with this conversation, and we'll pick it up in a moment, right after we check the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing former FBI Director James Comey's testimony before Congress, the fallout on the Hill, and the week in Washington. Our guests tonight are Jack Riley of New College, Frank Patti of the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Jeff Ornstein, author of Fixing American Government. And gentlemen, every week I ask our panelists to talk about how what's happening in Washington is impacting Republicans and Democrats and independents here on the Suncoast. And on that note, Jeff, you made news this week, young man.
Yeah, I guess so.
You have started a political action committee here locally for what purpose?
Well, we've actually started two political action committees. By law, a federal political action committee and a state political action committee are separate, and we're filing papers to become both.
To do what?
To find new and progressive and thoughtful candidates, to vet them, to help train them to be effective candidates, and to do our best to support them once they start to run.
Why now? I mean, in the last few election cycles, Republicans have done very well. Both the president carried this area, state senators, state house members are all Republican at this stage. Do you have any reason to think that the midterm elections are going to be any different?
Yes. It's a complicated answer. The why now is because we finally decided to pull the trigger. We've been talking about doing something for a long time, and it just coalesced one night in some discussions with friends. But I think Donald Trump and what's happening in Washington is going to have an effect, and I think the midterm elections are likely to be realignment elections and swing elections.
Jack, you're the political scientist here. You study these things. Do you have any real feeling about whether or not what's happening in Washington is going to, break what has been in recent past a pretty solid Republican wall around here?
There are a lot of things going into this. The first thing is that the national level of politics always affects the local level. People pay attention to the national level, not necessarily the local level. In Sarasota in particular, though, we have had a long string of Republican victories, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Republicans have successfully redistricted themselves into a position of advantage right now.
Gerrymandering.
That said, Sarasota itself is not as completely red as many places are. And so one of the reasons that you might see national committees and local committees take more interest in the area is that it is a flippable seat.
Frank, I wanted to ask you about that because, as Jack said earlier, Republicans are basically going to stick with the president. The Democrats are basically going to be against the president. But the independents, polls show nationally, are peeling away from the president. And if you add that to the Democratic vote on the Suncoast, are you concerned that can really change the playing field?
Well, one thing, that these are the same polls that turned around and said Trump couldn't win. Okay, so I don't trust polls. It depends on what they ask, who they ask it to, and how they interpret their answer. Number two is, let me address one thing. We have had a voter action team for a number of years for organization. It is a top-down structure, and it works extremely well. We are well organized. We vet our candidates. We're doing much of what you're doing. Okay, and we've been doing it for a number of years.
But what we're talking about...
aware of what you're doing. That's why we're doing it.
Well, I mean, what Jeff is doing, it's not a grassroots effort so much as a political action committee basically tries to fund both state and federal candidates. You said that you're starting a federal political action committee. That means that, are you interested in targeting Vern Buchanan?
Yes.
That's going to take a lot of money.
It's going to take a lot of money, and it may take a long time. We're in this for the long haul. I have no illusions that suddenly this whole area is going to turn blue because of a local political action committee in 2018. But we are in it for as long as we need to be, and we have a bunch of committed citizens and a really good board of professional people, and who know something. I'm a political scientist. We've got lawyers and accountants and everything else. We're no bozos. I think we'll have an effect.
When it comes to the midterms, Jack, I heard Congressman Joaquin Castro say not long ago, a hurricane is coming. It could either be a Category 2 or a Category 5. Even if it's a Category 2, the Republicans may lose the House. But would it take something like a hurricane Category 5 for them to win a congressional seat around here or other Republican seats in Florida?
I mean, it's a little hard to say because, I mean, political science is not an exact science. This is not physics, for example. Like, we have free will as individuals, right? So one of the mistakes the Democrats made this past year was assuming that they could predict turnout and predict votes much better than we actually can. This seat is certainly more likely to flip than many others are, but it depends a lot.
Why do you say that?
Just because the partisan breakdown of this, I mean, this is not Montana or Utah or Nebraska.
We're only 7 points down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a close race.
In this environment, 7 points is not an insurmountable lead.
It's a long time until 2018.
Of course.
Time has been on our side right along, and there is a sort of a idea that the Republicans aren't organized, and in Sarasota, through our REC, Executive Committee, we are very organized, and we will get funding in a good amount, and we will organize out at the polls.
Of course, you're aware that traditionally in American politics, the party out of power starts picking up seats in the off-year elections. For the last 8 years, the Democrats have had the White House. Now the Republicans do. And are you at all concerned that because of that, just simply for the fact that the Democrats are out of power now, and if people are not happy with what's happening in Washington or what's happening in the White House, that may take a toll?
Some of the things that President Trump has done may come to fruition at that point.
Like
a lot of people were very happy that they pulled out of the environmental agreement. We are getting more money into NATO. His speech over there, it's about time we had put our foot down with this.
Yeah, but as you know, actually, those countries have been increasing their contributions to NATO for the last 2 years.
Some have.
Okay.
We've got a lot more doing it now. This speech he made today was a very good speech about infrastructure. If he can get that through, if the Republicans can get set up on a health plan, that'll be another thing. And if they can get the tax reform up, then we're in much better shape.
The guy next to you is shaking his head.
I wrote a book. One of the 7 books I've written on public policy was called Uncle Sam with a Throttle, United States Rail Policy. And I consider myself knowing a little bit about infrastructure. And I think there's no there in President Trump's infrastructure. It's 200 million maybe on a $1 trillion program, and there is no guarantee that the other 800 is going to be made up by private industry without huge concessions to them.
Jack, I know you want to say something, but we have to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, backlash to Sarasota's new mayor, Shelley Freeland Eddy. Welcome back. What will be the impact of James Comey's testimony this week? Can we expect new developments in the investigation into possible collusion between the Trump administration and Russia in the 2016 election? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Jack, I'm going to start with you because you were shaking your head when Frank was talking about, hey, the president is rolling out his infrastructure plan.
Yeah, that is part of the problem for the president right now, is that this week was supposed to be the infrastructure week. That was what the focus of the week was supposed to be. And here we are talking about James Comey and Russia and all that sort of stuff. This is a distraction, and this is a function of many different things, but partially it's a function of discipline at the national level.
Well, Frank, let me ask you about that, because you pointed to infrastructure. You're hoping that the Republicans get their act together on the health bill. But if almost on a regular basis you have these bombshells, whether it's Comey's testimony or now you have a special prosecutor, and you know there will be headline after headline, doesn't that impact the Republicans' abilities to get their agenda through the Congress?
I think they'll fight through it. I personally think it's going to die down because it's going to be in Mueller's hands. You'll hear stuff here and there going, but there has been nothing of proof of anything said. If Mueller's going to do it, he's going to do it quietly. If he's going to have an indictment, he's not going to say a word until he has evidence of it or no evidence of it.
So what do Democrats do? Do they just basically wait to see what happens with this investigation and hope that it takes a toll on the president or their agenda? Or do you think Democrats right now have to take the initiative and come out with their own messaging, whether it's for health care or anything else?
Absolutely. I think we have to be the loyal opposition. At the national level and at the grassroots level, we have to be savvy and effective and well-funded and diligent. We just can't give up because we think we're right. I think this is the most incompetent administration, and the man at the top seems to be temperamentally unsuited to govern, and he's making mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, I know he's still a rookie, but you know, he's behind 0 to 100 in the second inning. Right?
All right, we'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the backlash against Sarasota's newly appointed mayor, Shelley Freeland Eddy. Eddy was elected to the commission in 2015. Before the election, she got an endorsement from the LGBT rights group Equality Florida because of a survey she took after the election where she admitted that she misrepresented her true positions on the survey regarding her personal views on marriage equality and abortion rights. Eddy says there is a difference between her personal beliefs and public positions. Here's what some of you are saying about the situation. Carl Patterson writes, nothing wrong with her, as she said, nothing wrong here, as she said, she keeps her personal and business separate. Long as she fulfills her job duties, she still has every right to her personal beliefs. Peggy Pierce writes, she's swayed for support with lies. Now she's trying to play both sides of the fence. Her commission seat is up in 19, right? And Judith Justin writes, I think that the survey with her name on it should be plastered all over town. Well, what do you think about Comey's testimony and President Trump's response? Join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Jack Riley is an assistant professor of political science at New College of Florida. Frank Patty is secretary for the Republican Party of Sarasota. And Jeff Ornstein is the author of Fixing American Government.